Alrighty, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that you're all doing well, enjoying the beautiful summer weather that we have here in Michigan. It's great. We kind of went straight from heating to air conditioning. There wasn't so many of those nights where you just open your windows, but I am not complaining. I'm very happy that it's warm outside. You know, I have a man on my block. His name is Manny Middleman, and he is a survivor. He has been through many of the concentration camps, and there was one day where it was a beautiful day. It was one of those great spring days where it's 70 degrees outside with a blue sky with the sun shining. I walk past him, he's sitting outside enjoying the weather, and I say, "Good afternoon, Mr. Middleman. Isn't it a beautiful day today?" And he says, "Chaim, I've come to learn in life that every day that you're alive and breathing is a beautiful day." So that's just an incredible perspective for somebody who has lived an interesting, challenging life. The topic of today's class is called True Friendship, where we hope to explore together the Torah's perspective on friends, friendship. Much of that is based on love, because when you think about those friends that are closest to you, I believe there's actually some level of love involved. You love your really close friends. Women in particular will always sign off an email to their friends, love, or hugs and kisses, or XOXO. So believe you me, there is a good deal of love involved in friendship. And I would like to begin with a source. The source is from the Ethics of Our Fathers. Now, just a word about what that is. What is the Ethics of Our Fathers? It's a classic Jewish work. In Hebrew, it would be called the Pirkei Avot. And it is part of the Mishnah. The Mishnah is part of the oral tradition that we have in our Torah with 6 orders. One tractate in the Mishnah is called Avot, the teachings of our fathers, where different ethical and moral statements from the early sages, right around the beginning of the Common Era, some of those statements are recorded there. And we have the following statement made in the 5th chapter, and it says, "Any love that is dependent upon something, some external factor, then if that something were to disappear, the love will also disappear. But love that is not dependent upon something will never disappear." And I hope to clarify that statement. Again, if the love is dependent upon an external factor, then the love is unstable. Perhaps it's transient or ephemeral. It's not going to last because that factor may change. But love that is not based on any external factor, true love, that's something which will endure. And the Mishnah goes on to give examples, different cases, different kinds of love. And what is an example of a dependent love? It says in the Mishnah, that is the love that Amnon had for Tamar. That's a story. During the era of King David, there was a man, he was actually one of the sons of King David, by the name of Amnon, who took a particular interest in a young lady by the name of Tamar. She was exceptionally beautiful, and he very much desired her, to be with her. And then when he finally slept with her against her will, he no longer had an interest. He had satisfied his lust and desire, and the love was gone. It was love which was based on lust and desire. Lust is something which is short-lived, doesn't usually remain. I believe that Hollywood is a testament to that. What is the average lifespan of a marriage in Hollywood? I don't know, but let me tell you, they're not making it to a 10-year anniversary. Guaranteed. If they make it 2 years, they're doing quite well. It's based on externals, based on the way people look, personas and images. And that's something which fades very quickly. But what's an example of love that wasn't dependent upon some external factor? Says the Mishnah, that is the love that existed between David in his early years. His best friend was a young man by the name of Yonatan, or in English, Jonathan. Jonathan was the son of the king, the next heir to the throne. King Saul had a son named Yonatan. And he was the one who was going to be the next king of the Jewish people. But at some point, God decided that the dynasty of monarchy can't continue anymore from Saul. It was going to move to David. And David and Jonathan were the closest of friends, inseparable, despite the fact that their situation should really have made them enemies. Jonathan could have said to David, "You're taking the throne which rightfully should be mine." But he said to David, "No, you be the king, and I perhaps will be an advisor." He accepted God's decree, and the two of them were inseparable. The classic commentator on the Mishnah, known as the Bar Tanura, Rabbi Ovadia Bar Tanura, and they actually named a wine after him. You know those blue bottles of Moscato wine? We call it, soda wine, because it's about 6% alcohol and it doesn't really taste like wine. The women love it, the kids like it. It's one of these. There's also a wine called Rashi wine, which are two great commentators of the Torah, and they both have wines named after them. My son loves saying there's a dispute between Rashi and the Bartanura, which wine is better. That's a joke that really captures. What's that?
Morgan David.
Morgan David too. Excellent. So, the Bartanura, as he came to be called in his commentary, asks the question, he says, what does it mean, love which is not dependent upon anything? Isn't love always dependent upon something? When the Mishnah says that love that's not dependent on anything, that love will endure. Love is always based on something. What does the Mishnah mean? And here he clarifies. Let's take a look at source 2. He says, when love is dependent upon something which is just transient, it's not long-lasting, then when that something comes to an end, so will the love. If you love a woman because you feel that she's beautiful, that's what you love about her, her external beauty, that's the only thing you see in her. Well, first of all, an infatuation with beauty, even if she remains looking the way she did the day you married, which I'm sure all of you look. But even if she were to remain that way, with time, that kind of attraction fades. I think that Brad Pitt split, right? He split with Angelina Jolie, right? That marriage came to an end, right?
Yeah.
She still looks pretty good, right? And that just, you lose that. You lose that attraction because you get used to it, you get bored. Also, it's a fight against time. We age. We don't look like we looked like when we were 20. And therefore, if our love, if our friendship is based upon an external factor like looks, it will be short-lived. It will not last. But when love is founded upon something which lasts, like loving the good essence, wisdom, and righteousness of a person, if you love somebody because they are an incredibly good person, chances are that is much more likely to stick around throughout the decades of one's life. Then just like the foundation of the love, says the Bartanura, is something permanent, so too the love will also have a permanence. So first of all, the foundation of friendship. It needs to be a friendship which is not based, a love that is not founded upon external factors that are themselves going to end shortly. If you love somebody because they're rich, what happens when they lose their money? Does the love end? You know, and I grew up, I was fortunate to grow up in a wealthy neighborhood, and you saw certain times that when people hit hard financial situations, particularly in 2008 when everything came crashing down, there were some marriages that also came crashing down with the financial crash, because those marriages were based on the fact that we have a lot of money and therefore we'll enjoy life. When things get difficult, they weren't there for each other. If it's built, sandcastles in the air don't usually last. I just want to take a moment to examine. We've discussed this concept before, but we'll go over it again. What is the Hebrew word for love? How does one say love in Hebrew? Now, there are Israelis here, so it's not fair, but go ahead.
Ohev, ohevet.
Yeah,
Ahava.
ahava, which is actually a skin cream company in Israel, near the Dead Sea, because the Dead Sea is so rich in so many natural minerals. Ahava is the word for love. And if you were to examine the root of that word, it's from the word hav, which means to give, which is more Aramaic in its origin. Hav means to give. And there's a concept that love is very much based on giving. A few months ago, I remember it was a Sunday. It was a Sunday when we had the heaviest snowstorm here in Michigan. Remember that Sunday snowstorm where it snowed and snowed? I went down to the airport that day because just that day you can get tickets to Florida round trip for a great, great price if you will. I'm Jewish, not for a hobby, so I went down, I got those tickets. It took me a few hours. But that evening, that Sunday evening, we brought in a woman from Israel who was a marriage counselor, a very wise, sagacious marriage counselor. And she met with couples, and we had an attendance of 40 people at that event despite the weather conditions. And she was telling of some of her experiences in counseling, going through therapy with couples, and she said, couples often come to me, and they say, we're just not in love anymore. We need to split ways. We're not in love. And she says, really, you believe that being in love is just a state of being? When was the last time, she said to the husband, that you surprised your wife and you cooked her dinner? When was the last time you did that for her? When was the last time, he turns to the wife, you got up in the morning and made your husband a cup of coffee? Love is about giving. You build love. It's not something which just floats in the air in this nebulous state. It's something which you work towards by giving to the other person. That's a foundation of friendship. You give to a friend. You're there for them when they need you, and they'll be there for you as well. Friendship and love is based on giving. As the word in Hebrew, ahava, connotes. Have, to give, and then love will be created. There's an interesting insight that comes from one of the classic commentaries of the Torah known as Rashi. Rashi is an acronym for Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki. And in describing the significance of Rashi, I'll often tell people what Elvis did for rock and roll. I mean, he was the king. My wife's grandmother is from Memphis, Tennessee, and she was in school with Elvis. She was in school with Elvis, yeah. And he's the king. Rashi is very much the king of commentaries on the Torah. Without Rashi, we wouldn't be able to understand the simple explanation of both the Bible, the Torah. His commentary on the Talmud is incredible. You know, I learned something very interesting once. The way the Talmud works, if you ever opened up a copy of the Talmud in Hebrew, you have the text of the Talmud in the center of the page, with two of the major commentaries on either side. On one side you have the Tosfot, which are the grandsons of Rashi, and always on the inside of the margin is always the commentary of Rashi. So Rashi, his commentary on the Talmud is neither on the right side nor on the left side. It depends which page you're looking at. It's always on the inside near the binding of the book, never on the outside of the page. And I once heard someone explain the reason why they always placed Rashi on the inside and Tosfot on the outside. Because in the olden days, we take it for granted that you could buy a book for $10, for $5, $15. You could buy a book for very little money. But in the olden days, books were expensive. People didn't have access to the printing press as easily as we do now. And therefore, people held on to books for many years, and they became weathered and worn and yellowed. And the pages became brittle, and they would begin to crack at the edges. And you always wanted to make sure that you maintained the commentary of Rashi, which is vital to the understanding of the text of the Talmud. So they always put Rashi's commentary on the inside to ensure that Rashi will always be there with you. So there are two places in the Torah where it uses, now hang with me here for a moment, this is a bit complex and a little bit technical, but in Hebrew, when we use verbs, there are singular verbs. When you want to describe an individual doing something, you'll use one verb. So for example, he is eating. Hu ochel. He is eating. That's the singular, describing one person doing an action. The plural would be heim ochlim. They are eating. Different verb, different conjugation. Hebrew is actually one of the easiest languages to learn because you learn a string of verbs, and then there are different conjugations, different ways of formatting the verbs to describe he, she, who, who's doing it, and etc. And past, present, and then future. There are two places in the Torah, not far from each other, where the Torah uses a singular verb to describe a group of people, which is difficult to understand. It should use a plural verb. Why is it using a singular verb to describe a very large group of people? And let's see those two cases together. The first one is in source 4, the book of Exodus, chapter 14, verse 10. I knew a guy whose name was Leviticus. That was his name. People would sometimes call his home and they would say to his mom, hey, is Leviticus there? Can I speak to him? She'd say, no, Leviticus, he just made an Exodus. Source 4, Exodus 14. It says the verse, this is as the Egyptians were pursuing the Jewish people left Egypt, and Pharaoh had a change of heart. He said, how can it be that we sent out our slave population? Let's chase them, we'll pursue them. We will retrieve all of the gold and the silver that we lent them. It says that Pharaoh approached, and the children of Israel raised their eyes, and behold, Egypt was journeying after them. They were frightened, and the children of Israel cried out to Hashem. And of course we know the story continues where God split the sea. The Jewish people walked on dry land in the midst of a storming sea. And then as the Egyptians came in, the waves came crashing down upon them. But I want to just note the Hebrew for a moment. In the middle of the verse, I'm going to read it in Hebrew, it says, V'hinei, and behold, Mitzrayim nose'ah achareihem. Egypt was journeying. The word nose'ah in Hebrew is the singular verb to describe a person, a single person traveling, journeying. It should use the plural nosim. That would be more grammatically correct. Why is the verse describing the entire army with hundreds of chariots and foot soldiers in a singular verb? And Rashi, the king, takes issue with that and he gives an explanation. Let's turn the page. Page 3. Rashi says, journeying after them. I'm going to read it in Hebrew first and I'll translate. Belev echad, with one heart, ke'ish echad, as one person. There was something that united the Egyptians. They had a common heart. Whenever we speak about a person's heart, we speak about a person's desire. The Egyptians were all bound together as one by a common goal, a common desire. What was that? Well, interestingly, when God appeared to Moses at the burning bush, and he says, I want you to go to Pharaoh to tell him, please let the people go. It's fascinating to note that Moshe is instructed not to say to Pharaoh, let the people go for good. They're leaving bondage. They're no longer going to be slaves. But he asks Pharaoh, and that's the way he's instructed by God, to please let the Jewish people go for a 3-day holiday into the wilderness. And then the assumption is, the way it implies, the implication is, then they will return to Egypt. It's fascinating. That clearly was not the intent of either God or Moshe. They wanted the Jewish people to leave for good, but yet when Moshe makes the request to Pharaoh, he says, let them go for 3 days. And the commentaries all ask, if that's not the plan, then why is that the way you're asking? Right? For sure, Pharaoh, after the 10 plagues, would have let them go, even if they wanted to go for good. Why is he asking only for 3 days? One of the explanations that's given is that another instruction that God gave the Jewish people is before you leave Egypt, borrow from them. Gold and silver, valuables, borrow from them and carry it out with you. And that would serve as payment, restoration for all of the forced slave labor for which no remuneration was made throughout the entire 200-year period the Jewish people were in Egypt. They were instructed to borrow gold and silver. Now, if you're going to borrow gold and silver, they're not going to lend it to you if you're going for good. And the reason why they were told to borrow all of it was not simply to give them payment back, but it was to ensure that the Egyptians would pursue them, to retrieve. When the Egyptians realized the Jews were going for good, 3 days came and gone, they're not showing any signs of coming back. The Egyptians said, hey, what about all of our gold and silver? Let's chase them down and get it back. And one of the explanations is that was done as a motivating factor for the Egyptians to give chase in order that the sea could split and God could show them who runs the world. So what was it that united the Egyptian army? That we're using a singular verb. Again, the usage of a singular verb to describe this group of people is to show that they were united as one. But what united them? It was a common desire to retrieve their gold and silver. That's one kind of unity that you could have. We all want the same thing. You and I will go into business. What motivates us? Profit, motivation. We want to make money. So you and I will have a pact, a partnership together with a common goal. That's one kind of friendship. There's another time, though, that the Torah uses a singular verb to describe a group of people. And that is as the Jewish people were at the foot of Mount Sinai, ready to receive the Torah. Let's take a look at source 6, which is again from Exodus chapter 19. They journeyed from a place called Rephidim, and they arrived in the wilderness of Sinai. And they encamped in the wilderness, and Israel encamped there opposite the mountain. And if you look at the Hebrew verb there, it says, Vayichan Shom Yisrael Neged Hahar. Vayichan. They encamped. A singular verb. The plural would be Vayachanu. He uses a singular verb. And here, if you look at the commentary of Rashi, it's almost identical. And if you were to read it quickly, you would think it's saying the same thing. But if you look at it more closely, you'll see a big difference. And here Rashi says in Hebrew, source 7, Vayichan Sham Yisrael, and the Jewish people encamped there, Ke'ish Echad, as one person, Belev Echad, with one heart. The order is reversed. In describing the Egyptian army, is Belev Echad. They had one goal, one desire, and that united them, that forged them into one people. But in describing the Jewish people, at the threshold of right about to receive the Torah, It says they were ke'ish echad, they were united like one person, and that gave them a common goal. The unity of the Jewish people at Mount Sinai was based on the fact that we just felt like family. Felt like you're my brother, you're my sister. We felt ke'ish echad, like one person. And one person, one family usually has a common destiny, a common goal. But it wasn't because we had some common desire. We all wanted the same profit. Businesses, when they're no longer profitable, if you're going to declare bankruptcy, chances are the friendship will also be terminated because that common goal is no longer present. But if a sense of unity is because you're my brother, you're my sister, and even if we live on different continents and we have no common ground, different businesses, I'm a doctor, you're a lawyer. The joke goes, talking about doctors and lawyers, that they were a doctor and lawyer, each one would always be solicited by their friends for free either counsel or medical advice. And it was difficult because it would take a lot of their time, and they were always, it's like when they were both observant, they would go to services in the morning, they just want to get to work, but someone would say, is it okay if I just ask you a quick question before you go? And the doctor turns to the lawyer and says, how do you, I see that over the past few weeks, people stopped coming over, how do you deal with this problem? And he says, people would come over for advice, and afterwards I would give my secretary their name and address, and she would bill them. And then they stopped coming. The doctor says, that's a brilliant idea. Well, 2 weeks later, the doctor got a bill in the mail from the lawyer's secretary. It's not fair to tell just a lawyer and a doctor joke without telling a rabbi joke, because I'm a rabbi. I gotta poke fun of myself. So here we go. The joke goes that there's a rabbi who lives to a ripe old age, a long life, finally makes his way to heaven, and he was expecting quite the honorary welcome to heaven. But to his surprise, chagrin, and dismay, there were a few straggling angels that kind of escorted him in. He got a back seat, the back row. Okay, maybe this is the way things roll over here. But a short while later, all of a sudden they're preparing the heavenly band. It's an 18-piece orchestra. They're rolling out the red carpet, and tens of thousands of angels are going to escort some dignitary into heaven. Who's this dignitary? It's an Israeli bus driver from the company of Eged. And the rabbi says, I don't understand. My whole life was dedicated to the service of God. I would teach people words of Torah. I would give sermons in synagogue. Why for me a lukewarm welcome, and for this Israeli bus driver, he's treated like a VIP? And they say, Rabbi, you don't understand. When you did your job, people went to sleep. When he did his, they would pray. So friends, the idea here is the difference between the unity in the Egyptian army. There was desire for money. Let's retrieve that which we lent. They were united by a goal, by an ambition. And that united them like one person. But that's a frail kind of unity, subject to being fractured when that goal is no longer present. The Jewish people at Mount Sinai, the friendship, the bonds between each and every one of them was ki'ish echad. They started like one person, a sense of family, of oneness. And therefore they had a common destiny, a common future together. Let's take a look at one of the most famous verses in the entire Torah. In Hebrew, it is v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, which means you shall love your fellow like yourself. I heard that the Christians hijack this. They claim this is their mantra. The reality is it's a verse in the Torah, which even they acknowledge the Old Testament came before the New Testament. So it was ours first. And this is a verse in Leviticus chapter 19. And it says, do not take revenge, which we once gave an entire class on the idea, the Torah command of not taking revenge. And do not bear a grudge against the children of your people. Two separate things. You can't take revenge, and you can't even bear a grudge, which means you harbor ill will for something negative that someone once did to you. You shall love your fellow like yourself. I am Hashem. Incredible verse. Love your neighbor like yourself. What does it mean? Now let's just, we just finished page 3. And we're going to move to page 4. We're going to embark upon source number 9 in just a moment. But I just want to begin by asking you a question. Do you believe that it's humanly possible to love another person, to love your friend, like you love yourself? Is that possible? You know, we speak about unconditional love. People say they want unconditional love. Is it
Child.
to a child, maybe, right? To a child, maybe, and even to a child, the idea of to love a child like you love yourself. That I believe in that, because I believe I would give my life for my children. For someone who is not a child, unconditional love. You know, marriages are based on probably a set of commitments of trust, of conditions. If those trusts are broken, perhaps the love will be lost. I don't think marriage is unconditional love. To a child, maybe there's unconditional love. I don't know. You know, if a child, you know, I'm going to pick a bad example. I'm sorry, but it's an example that's just a horrific one, and therefore maybe would accentuate the point. There was a thing in the news a few years ago about some man in Detroit who kidnapped women and kept them in his basement for decades. When that mother discovered that that's what her child, that's the monster that her child became, is she still capable of loving that child? I don't know. I don't know.
Deep down, yes.
Maybe, right? So perhaps to a child love is unconditional, but is it possible to love somebody else like you love yourself? And here's where Nachmanides is the number 2 commentator on the Torah after Rashi. That's an acronym. It stands for Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman. His father's name was Nachman. He became to be called Nachmanides. And he's explaining this verse that we just read. Love your fellow like yourself. He says it can't be taken literally. He doesn't believe it can be taken literally. It's not possible, says he. For it is not humanly possible to love someone else like you love yourself. And furthermore, now this is his great question. This is a Talmudic question, which disproves taking this idea literally. What's the law? I'm going to give you a case. It's a harsh case again, but it's an interesting case. You're traveling with your friend in the desert, and you get lost. And you have around your neck a canteen, a flask of water. And based on your estimates, you'll get to civilization where you could replenish your supplies in 2 days. And based on the calculations you make, there's enough water for one of you to drink, and one of you would live. If you both drink the water, neither of you will survive. If you share the water with your friend, you have some, I have some, neither one of us will make it. What's the law in that case? It's my water, it's hanging around my neck. My wife packed it for me. She says, you never know, make sure you take a lot of water. I remember I was in Israel for a little while, and my mother had this thing about dehydration, because she read an article about a few boys that were hiking by Ein Gedi, which is a nature reserve by the Dead Sea. And she said, Chaim, they dehydrated, something terrible happened. Make sure you take a lot of water. So I would literally load up my backpack with 12 liters of water. People thought I was nuts, you know? But I made my mother happy, which was an incredible thing, right? So your wife packs you up the water. It's yours. Who drinks the water? And the ruling is there's a dispute. You would guess if it's in the Talmud, there's probably a dispute, and there is. But the halacha follows the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, who says that your life comes first. Your own life comes first. In Hebrew, it's called chayecha kodmin. You take precedence. It's your water. Save your own life. You drink it. There's a discussion, are you allowed? Generally, you're not allowed to endanger your life, right? That's why I've never gone skydiving. I'm a father of 4 beautiful children and a 5th on the way. So, thank you. Thank you very much. I say that husbands should be allowed to have cravings. They should be allowed to fetch a little bit. But I try to make my wife food that she likes. Anyway, there's a question if you're allowed to give it to somebody else. But the rule is your life comes first. And asks Nachmanides, how can you tell me that your life comes first? The Torah says, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Love your fellow like you love yourself. Yet the law says yourself takes precedence. And therefore, based on 2 ideas, based on this Talmudic question, showing with the rule in the case of the water that you place yourself first, and also by him saying he doesn't believe it's humanly possible to love someone else like you love yourself, he says you can't take the verse literally. What then does it mean to love someone else like you love yourself? And here's how he explains it. This is a very deep insight into human psyche, personality of people. And we all want wonderful things for ourselves. We want that we should be brilliant. We want that our kids should be brilliant. We want that we should be good looking. We want that we should be wealthy. And the difficulty is that when someone else attains those things, it's difficult for us to watch. If somebody on our block were to win the lottery, perhaps we would be a bit resentful. Why him? Does he really know? Does he really deserve it? I've heard women complain about a woman who's better looking than all of them. Here she comes again, The person in school who's brilliant. It's okay for them to be brilliant. Just make sure they're not as brilliant as me, and then we're okay. And the nature of people is that we want wonderful things for ourselves, and we're kind of like okay for other people to have as long as they don't surpass our level. Then we become jealous and resentful. That's the nature of the human being. And says Nachmanides, when someone else has something, someone else wins the lottery, does that in any way take away and subtract from what you have? It doesn't really affect you in any way whatsoever. Be happy for them. Be glad that they have something good. They should even surpass you. You'd be okay with that. Just like you want something good for yourself, you should equally want something good for someone else. That's what it means, love your neighbor like yourself. It doesn't believe it's possible to actually love them like you love yourself. But what is possible, very difficult, is to be happy when they get great and wonderful things that you value. When they get it, you shouldn't be jealous. If anyone here speaks Yiddish, there is a great Yiddish word, and there is no, I believe, exact English translation of the word. So I'll do my best to translate it for you. But the Yiddish word is tifagin, someone else.
Not to be jealous.
Yeah, now, there's no exact English word. You could describe it as like what it is. It means that I'm comfortable, I'm allowing you to have that thing, and I'm not going to be resentful about it just because I don't have it and you do. Tifagin someone else. It's a very Jewish concept. Speaking about Yiddish, I saw once someone explain what is the difference between a shlemazel, a shlemiel, and a nudnik. These are three things: a shlemazel, a shlemiel, and a nudnik. What's the difference? And they say, the shlemiel is the waiter who's carrying the soup. That's the shlemiel. And he drops it. The guy who's pulling noodles out of his soup pants, he's the shlemazel. And the guy's saying, was it chicken soup or was it meat soup? He's the nudnik. Yeah, the nudnik is the guy who's a nudge. He's asking questions that are just annoying. So when you have your freshly pressed soup, now with a very large matzo ball sitting in the center, if he's asking what kind of soup it was, that's not the question you want to hear. So hence we've labeled him a nudnik. It's an incredible idea from Nachmanides, from the Ramban, what it means to love somebody else. Just like you're happy with things when they go well for you, be happy with things when they go well for somebody else. Fagin someone else to have wonderful things. You could turn to page 5. And this is another quote from the Ethics of Our Fathers from the first chapter. In that first chapter, what it does is it kind of covers the entire transmission, the chain of the transmission of the oral Torah from generation to generation, explaining which head sage of each generation received the tradition from the previous one. And there's someone named Yehoshua ben Perachia. In Talmudic or Mishnaic literature, whenever we give somebody a name, it's not like a last name like Friedman or Goldberg, but it's the son of so-and-so. That's how we give somebody the name. So Yehoshua, the son of Perachia, that's the way his name is listed. And someone named Natai Ha'arbeli, they received the tradition from them, from the previous ones. And Rabbi Yehoshua ben Perachia, he makes the following statements. First of all, he says, make for yourself a teacher. It's important that you have a mentor in life. I was one time sitting in a lecture where we were learning some of the Mishnah that's mentioned in the Talmud, and it was a very obscure Mishnah. It was a Mishnah that the person who was writing it was not conveying the ideas in a very clear way. And I was thinking to myself, if I was the one writing this, I would have done a much better job. Why are they writing this in this? It's like a mystery. It was like a riddle. Why were they writing it in such an obscure way? And I asked the question. And And my teacher gave me the following answer, which is an incredible idea about making for yourself a teacher. He said, you know, if they wanted to write it clearer, they could have. They were greater sages than you and I. Very articulate if they wished to be. But they didn't want that the wisdom of the Torah should be something accessible just by opening a book. Because when you have a teacher is also a role model. Somebody who to learn how to live life in a moral and ethical way from. You need that persona, you need the person not just to give you information, but to show you how to live your life. And I remember when I was a teenager, the head of the academy, of the yeshiva academy that I went to, was an elderly man who was a sage, a very pious individual. And I would watch the way he would treat the janitor. The janitor would sometimes knock on the door of his apartment where he had in the yeshiva to change the garbage or to clean up whatever needed to be cleaned. He treated the janitor like a dignitary. And you should have seen the way he treated his wife. She was a queen. And that gave me a life lesson, not just about the information, but make for yourself a teacher, because that teacher can serve as a role model to how to live your life. That's idea number 1 listed in the Mishnah. Idea number 2 is acquire for yourself a friend. Acquire a friend. Interesting phrase. The word acquire often means to buy. And in the class Exploring True Friendship, going to digress for a moment. At the end of the source sheet I have quotes on friendship. And let's turn there for a moment, because one of those quotes really speaks directly to this idea of acquiring a friend. And that could be found on page bottom of page number 8. Let's go there. The very bottom of page number 8. We're going to come back, so we'll have to do some page turning. Bear with me, please. Rabbi Noach Weinberg was the founder of the Or Sameach Yeshiva in Jerusalem, which has outlived him. It still goes on strong today. It is the Eish HaTorah, the Eish HaTorah Yeshiva in Jerusalem. First of all, he says about friendship that some roads can be traveled alone, but the road of life shouldn't be one of them. Go with a friend. Important, beautiful quote. Some roads, it's a great feeling to be the only car on the road. No one's there to cut you off. But the road of life is not one of those roads you should travel alone. Do it with a friend. And then we turn to page 9, and this is the part that I want. Here we will have some clarity why it mentions acquire, buy a friend. What does that mean to buy a friend? Friends can't be bought. He says, when shopping for a car, you decide in advance on a specific set of features. Do you want the built-in GPS? Do you want the remote start? Or perhaps those warmers for those cold winter mornings and the seat just warms you up from underneath? It's beautiful. And then you shop around for the best deal before making an investment. A car is a big purchase. You don't buy a car every day. A home is even a bigger investment. You're certainly not going to buy a home just because it's the closest one to where you live right now. You're going to look, you're going to shop around. He says we should do no less when looking for a friend. Yet often our friends are the result of circumstances. Neighbors, colleagues, roommates. We play tennis on the same court, and then we had some pizza together, so now we're friends. But it's not as simple as that, says Rabbi Weinberg. A good tennis partner might not make a good friend once your interest in tennis has waned. Ask yourself, what will this friend be like in 20 years from now? Be proactive and go find the right friend. A friend should be for life. Choose a friend who seeks truth and whose goals and values you respect. Create a list of the top qualities that you look for in a friend. When you make a big purchase, when you make a big acquisition, you buy a home, a new home. Who in their right mind would buy a home without first looking at it carefully? I'm going to raise my hand on that one. I said, true story. We were living in New York about 3 years ago. And my wife, we first came together to see the Detroit community. And it was incredible. You guys are amazing, by the way. You're warm and you're welcoming. And it was not warm. It was the middle of December. And I never experienced cold like that. I had gone back to New York. And I said, when I came to Detroit, I said, guys, I know what you call this level of cold. This is called a polar vortex, because it was a new term that I learned that winter. And they looked at me and said, no, this is just like a Tuesday in Detroit. So it was very cold. The people were very warm and welcoming. My wife went back a few weeks later to go look at homes. She found a great home. And she says to me, should we make an offer on it? You haven't seen it. I said, well, is there a place for me to have a bed and a desk? And she said, yeah, you'll have a bed and you'll have a desk. I said, well, wonderful. That's great. And I placed my trust completely in her. My help in doing some interior design in our home was staying out of her way. And she did a fantastic job. She's very creative, very artistic, and beautiful. So most people, though, would never buy a home without first seeing it, or at least sending their wife to go ahead and see it. And the same is true with a friend. A friend should not just be because, okay, this is my colleague at work, so this will be my friend. Is this the best friend for me to have? It's important that we give it the same level of research and thought that we give a big acquisition. Hence, it says, acquire for yourself a friend. So let's turn back to that source. I believe it was on page 5. I'm on page 5. And it's the top of page 5. It's still towards the end of source 10. Acquire for yourself a friend, the top of page 5. And then here's the incredible idea. And judge every person with the benefit of the doubt. That's his third statement. Make for yourself a teacher. Acquire for yourself a friend. And judge every person with the benefit of the doubt. If you want to be able to maintain your friends, and they do something which can be perceived as something negative, and why did they do that? Didn't they realize that was going to hurt me? Perhaps there's an alternative understanding to it. Perhaps there's more to the story. And if you give them the benefit of the doubt, you'll be able to preserve your friendship. I'll share with you a story. My father-in-law once heard about there's another Yiddish word. When you describe the parents of the bride and the parents of the groom, what relationship do they have with each other? You'll call them machetanim. That's how you describe that relationship. I don't know how you say that in English. But you say machetanim, that's what we say.
No, it is hard to explain that somebody gets.
Yeah. All right, so good. Machetanim, were we good on that? Machetanim don't always get along so well. We hope, we wish, but sometimes things go wrong. And there was one situation where they had an engagement party. And the side of the groom were astounded because even though it was a very formal party and they wrote clearly on the invitations, black tie event, the father of the bride came in without wearing a necktie. And they couldn't believe it. They're telling the guests to wear a tie and you come without a necktie to your own daughter's engagement party. Shocking. Okay. So, the day of the wedding arrives, and of course that was a black tie event. And again, the father of the bride comes in without a necktie. And the groom, the machetanim, they're murmuring, they're trying to get someone to go over and say, would you please put on a tie? It's disrespectful to our guests, it's disrespectful to us. Don't you give this occasion at least the importance to put on a necktie? And they did a little bit of investigation. And it turns out that the father of the bride was Israeli. And he had been in the Yom Kippur War. And the Yom Kippur War was a brutal one. We were caught off guard, and we lost a lot of our boys in the Yom Kippur War. And he had around his neck a pair of binoculars with a leather strap. And there was one situation where they got involved in hand-to-hand combat with Egyptian soldiers. And the Egyptian who he was fighting with pulled on that leather strap very hard and tried to strangle him. And he barely survived that encounter. Ever since then, he could never have anything tight around his neck. It made him feel uncomfortable. That's the reason why he wouldn't wear a necktie. And that's a valid explanation. Don't jump to conclusions. Give the person the benefit of the doubt if you want to maintain your friend. So the same Mishnah which tells us acquire a friend gives us the recipe to maintaining those friendships. Perhaps there's something that you don't understand, you're not aware of. And then make your decision once you are fully informed. There's a great quote from the wisest of all men, source 11. King Solomon writes in his book of Kohelet, Ecclesiastes. He says, 2 are better than 1, for they get a greater return on their labor. When you do something with someone else, it's always better than doing it alone. I'll share with you a brief episode from the Talmud, and then I want to go on to just some thoughts and ideas why friends are so valuable. What is their friendship gives us? But before we get there, brief episode in the Talmud. The Talmud, I'm going to just paraphrase because I'm short on time, tells of the great sage Rabbi Yochanan, the wisest man in his entire generation. And his brother-in-law, a man named Reish Lakish, was his study partner for many years. And then tragically, Reish Lakish passed away. And the students of the academy said, we need to find another study partner for our master. And they chose someone who was incredibly sharp, very gifted, talented individual, named Elazar ben Pedas. And after some time where this Rabbi Yochanan had with his new study partner, they came and they said, "Nu, how's it going with your new study partner, Rabbi Yochanan?" And so they got to tell you, when I had a Reish Lakish, every time I made a statement, he would ask me 24 questions. He would challenge me. He would say, "No, I have a proof not like you from here." And I would dispute it and I would bring answers, 24 answers. And between that back and forth, we would deepen, we would widen our understanding of the topic. This new sage is great. Every time I say something, he brings me support. He says, "You're right, and I'll prove it to you." He says, "Don't you think that what I'm telling you is right? That's why I'm saying it, because I think I'm right. I would rather you challenge me." And that's a unique aspect of friendship that we're going to get to. The idea of a foil, of a challenge, somebody to point out another perspective, a different point of view. And together you'll have a deeper understanding. So allow me now for the closing minutes of the afternoon to go through some ideas. These are just ideas that I thought of. Why friends are so valuable. What is it that we gain in friendship? And let's turn now to page number 6. And I write, friendship is for ... And I'm going to give you a few ideas. First of all, companionship. One of the greatest punishments they could ever give a person is solitary confinement. To be alone. Being alone is very harsh. You know, most people, when they take a vacation, whoever goes on a vacation alone, just one person, some people, but it's rare, it's uncommon. I do, by the way, but my wife tells me I'm strange. I sometimes go to these parks like Kensington or Island Lake Park, and I go there and I run and I swim and I bring a book or a Hebrew book and I'll read. I like alone time. But most people, when they want to go on a vacation, they go with somebody else because companionship is so valuable. A few years ago, almost 10 years ago actually, my wife tragically lost her grandfather. So her grandmother was now a widow. And I made sure I called her every single Friday. When she was single, every Friday I would call her and say, "Bubby, how are you?" She since then met a wonderful man. She got remarried, thank God. But for the years, I did not mean that. No. I did not mean that. Thank God I don't have to be the one to call her. I did not mean completely out of context. I actually don't call her as much now, but she doesn't need it as much. That's the truth. So, when she was alone, she wasn't used to being alone. It was a very hard, sad time in her life for her. She would go to sleep at night with the TV on, just to hear voices. Because that gave her some, even though the voices weren't real, they weren't with her in the room, it gave her some sense of companionship. To be alone is very difficult. And what we love in a friend is the companionship. Someone's there with me. You know, a friend is someone that you could confide in. You could share something that's troubling you, something that's weighing on your heart. And even if that friend doesn't even say anything, they don't solve the problem for you. You know, very often women will get annoyed at husbands. If husbands hear their wife's problem, they come up with a solution, and she'll get annoyed, you know? And you'll be like, "Well, why are you upset? This is a brilliant solution. This will fix your problem." And she'll be like, "I didn't want a solution. I wanted empathy. I wanted you to relate to the difficulty. I want you just to listen. Don't solve it." Sometimes when we just confide, we trust in someone else, that we could share with them some of the difficulties that we're going through, and we know they won't betray our trust, they won't broadcast that on the internet. That's the value in a friend. Turning to page 7. A friend will give us support and empathy. I once saw a very cute cartoon that differentiated between sympathy and empathy. And the cartoon had somebody walking in the forest, and there was one of these hunter's traps where there was a hole, a pit, covered by leaves, and two friends were walking in the forest. One of them fell in. The other friend peers over the edge and looks down and says, "Whew, must be dark in there, huh? Doesn't look so fun." That perhaps is sympathy. But empathy was where you climbed down and you sat there with them until you managed a way to get out together. When you feel someone else's plight, someone else's difficulty, that's empathy. And we could often tell who our friends are from when things are not looking so rosy and peachy for us. You know, everyone wants to be your friend if you're the one who just won the lottery. You know, sign me up. I want to jump on that bandwagon and be your friend. But when things are harsh and difficult, and you see those people that are there for you then, people that give you the support, times of difficulty, those are true friends. Someone that can give advice, guidance. A friend is not someone who just will walk through life with you being your yes man. Yeah, you're doing good, you're doing good. What if I'm not doing the right thing? Do you care about me enough to point that out to me? Show me my mistake. Make sure that I won't fall into something negative or bad. A good friend was walking with another, and the guy says, I'm going to start smoking. Pulls out a cigarette for the first time. A good friend will grab it away and say, what are you doing? Don't you realize where you'll end up with this? A good friend cares about you. It's not always pleasant to tell someone they're doing something wrong, but a good friend will suffer that unpleasantness because he values the friendship. A friend offers an objective perspective. Sometimes we have our own biases. We get into a fight with someone else, and we believe they're dead wrong and we're absolutely right. And a friend who doesn't have that subjective view, they have the bird's eye view, they'll be able to point out, they may have, this is probably a two-sided street, will point out your objective friend. They don't have that same leaning and prejudice that you have. They're objective. That's a value in a friend. We are so much structured and molded by the people, by the friends and environment and neighborhood that we associate with. If we have friends who are upstanding individuals who share the same values that we do, they will help us to accomplish those values through our friendship. We'll build to great things. So a friend is someone who shares our values and will work together to accomplish them. Particularly in the study of Torah, we say that the Talmud says, O chavrusa o misusa. Get me a study partner, or there's no point in studying. Because a study partner will always listen to what you have to say, and will be a sounding board, and perhaps they have a different point of view. And therefore, friends are someone that we could discuss meaningful ideas with, not just simple chatter, but things that we really care about, things that we believe deeply to be true. Politics, let's say. And we could argue about it, right? And we can argue, and we're meant to be able to argue in a way where things don't get personal. We argue about ideas. We never attack or vilify the other person. But we're open. We're willing to hear the other person's side of view. Sometimes you just listen to be able to you gotta wait till you can say your side. We actually listen carefully to what the other person is saying. Very often a friend will be someone who has strengths in areas that I have deficiencies. And I may have strengths in areas where they're lacking. We complement each other. And I'm going to end with the following idea. There are times in life where we're about to embark upon an undertaking. I'll give you an example. This past Sunday morning, our medicine cabinet was in disarray. Things were not organized, and that was a result of a few months of things not being put back where they should. And my wife and I sat down together on the floor of the hallway where the medicine cabinet stood, and we organized everything. Tooth care, nasal and eye care, medicines, antibiotics, child care. We created little baskets, and everything had its own basket to go into. And I assure you that had it been me alone, I would have been overwhelmed. Had it been my wife, she's amazing, she's like Superwoman, maybe she would have done it, I don't know. But when you undertake a project with a friend, whatever that project is, when you have someone else to share the burden with you, it's much easier. And friends are things which are so incredibly valuable. We're meant to cherish them, we're meant to protect them. And again, I want to just end off with the phrase, give your friend the benefit of the doubt. That will help to preserve them. Thank you very much.
Thank you.